Hi, friends, and welcome to the School Librarian Learning Network podcast. I'm Steve Tatro, also known as Dr. T Loves Books, and I love talking about all things related to school libraries. I may be an old dog, but I'm always trying to learn new tricks. That's why in each episode of the SLLN podcast, I'll chat with a school librarian about a lesson, program, or activity they love. Hopefully, this can be a place for school librarians to get ideas and find new ways to engage with their students and staff. As a good friend likes to say, we're better together. So I hope this podcast will help school librarians connect with and learn from each other. The opinions and ideas shared in this podcast by myself and my guests are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. And because school librarians always strive to be good digital citizens, I cite sources when using material that is not my own. Without further ado, let's get to this week's episode. Hey everybody, we're back and I'm excited. I'm talking to a new friend today. And so this is going to be a fun one. There's a lot of interesting ideas that we're going to be digging into here. So without further ado, let me turn it over to our guest. Jen, why don't you take a second to introduce yourself, tell folks where you're at and what you do.
All right. My name is Jennifer Fox Eberle, and I live right outside of the Chicago area in a suburb north of the city called Lake Zurich. And I am currently in a middle school. We are grades 6 through 8. And I serve as the school librarian. It is a unit district. So I do have the opportunity to PLC with, I have a sister librarian at another middle school and then my high school librarian as well.
That's
So we get to share a lot of ideas.
Oh, that's great. Man, you're really fortunate when you get to be in a situation like that where there are those other librarians in your district you can kind of build programs with and like integrate different ideas into your school, their school. So many opportunities there. That's cool. So I'm curious, how did you end up in the school library? What was sort of your path to the book room?
So this is my 27th year in education.
Nice.
And I spent the first 18 years in a classroom teaching ELA,
Me too.
mostly with gifted kids. And it was a magical 18 years. And that is not an exaggeration. It was absolutely amazing. It was definitely a niche for me. I also had the opportunity to work on an amazing team. So we were a self-contained team.
Ooh.
And I taught 6th grade and 8th grade. And the four of us kind of worked together and as a self-contained team, we just got to do a lot of really special things with those kids. And then what happened is like everything in education, you don't always have a lot of opportunities to move around.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of get, into a position and there's not a lot of options. So my colleague who I'd worked with for years was going to retire. I knew it was coming, and I knew they were going to take our program and they were going to shake it up a little bit. And I was not excited about the shakeup. So I started thinking, my Sundays were spent at Starbucks grading papers, very dedicated students. It was common that I would spend Sunday afternoon on Google Docs with kids, and we would be conferencing for hours. And I got to work with some of the most talented writers and readers, and just had an amazing, first 18 years. But when I knew it was kind of coming to an end, I thought, oh, I want to do something else. I want to stay in education. I love my school district, but I think I want to try something else. And so, like a lot of us in education, I had already kind of maxed out my education as far as my district was concerned. And I didn't want to teach high school, which is funny because I feel like my middle grade kids were always like, you should teach high school. And I was like, no, you guys are so angsty in high school. I kind of like middle school because they still kind of like you, but they have lots of sass. And so I like that. And I thought, you know what? I've spent a lot of my childhood in public libraries, and it was an important part of my maturation. And so that's kind of what I wanted to kind of reinvent the way libraries were perceived in my school. And I knew that we had a referendum coming up. I knew there was an opportunity. They were going to remodel the library, make it much more modern. And then when I went to library school, I started to discover that it was an advantage that I had already been in the building 18 years. So I had a relationship with these teachers, so I didn't have to build the same kind of trust that I think you have to do when you come in new. And you're begging teachers to work with you. So that's kind of how I got there.
Nice, man. Yeah, I definitely feel like those folks who get to library in the school that they were teaching in come in with a handful of extra cards to play because the people know you know the programs, you get like, here's something that I can help with, here's ideas I already had that I want to explore more that I can now share with others too. So yeah, I definitely think there's a huge advantage there. Not that it's also not a good thing sometimes to be the new person in a new
Mhm,
place to shake things up, but it definitely can be a much easier transition if you kind of
mhm,
are
mhm.
familiar with where you're going. Yeah, I can totally get that. So, we're going to be talking about your Writers Week program that you do. This is a really fascinating thing. And knowing that you were an ELA teacher, I can absolutely see the connections and the tie ins here. But I'm kind of curious, like, where did this come from in the first place?
So, my district in general is very, very supportive of bringing authors in to the school.
That's awesome.
And as soon as I got into the library, I really kind of formed great relationships with my elementary librarians in district as well. And
Mm.
my building shares, um, my middle school is attached to an elementary school in district. And so
Oh,
the elementary librarian is very creative, and her and I got together and we started just kind of doing some brainstorming. We shared some authors, which was very cool. We got to have Tim Green.
ooh,
Um, and the kids were really excited about him. We had Margaret Haddock. So we've had some big
wow,
names.
yeah.
Um, and her and I have done some creative collaboration, which has been fun. And then I had a young teacher in my building who I had been on some committees with. She knew that I had written a large part of the ELA curriculum, so I knew it really well.
Hmm.
And she came to me and said, "Hey, what would you think about taking this idea of having an author come and making it a little bit bigger? Making it let's call it a writer's week." And the reason she was passionate is that she is a writer herself
Mm.
and is getting her first book published this spring,
Ooh,
which is very exciting. It's a middle grade
yeah.
book. Her name is Connie Richardson, and she's awesome. So I have to tell you, like in the beginning, our library had just been the year she came to me, which was 4 years ago, we had just remodeled. And it was just, we had just gotten out of COVID. And I thought, oh, there had been a lot of changes. And I was a little bit reluctant. I said, is this the right year to do this? The library is reopening. There's so much change. And she was just very enthusiastic, and she just said, "Jen, I really think we can pull this off. Let's do it."
Nice.
And I love the enthusiasm, and I'm like, "Okay, all right." And I don't, being a librarian, I think a lot of people would have the same experience where it's such an island in so
Hmm.
many ways. Um, and I didn't realize that until I left my team and went into the library.
Yeah.
Um, and so I was excited that somebody wanted to do something with me. Um, and I think her enthusiasm just encouraged me to do it. So we sat down and we kind of came up with a plan, with some ideas. And then we went to our administrator and said, we kind of want to bring the school together post COVID. This feels like if we did a one book, one school experience, this
Mm.
seems like something that could really take off.
Yeah.
So he was great. I mean, we did really all the work. We really just needed his permission. And we came up with some ideas of how to I have a very generous budget, so I knew that I could fund some of the activities, and then my PTO stepped in, and I'm very, very fortunate. Lake Zurich has an educational foundation,
Hmm.
and they also give grants for innovation.
Hmm.
So I've been able to reach out to them, not every year, but it depends on the year. They also support our writers,
Wow, that's
who come
awesome.
in.
Hmm.
So that's kinda how it started, and it's obviously kind of blown up since then.
That's awesome, man. And I love that you've got that not just buy-in from one of your teachers, but that enthusiastic, looking for the collaboration, looking for the ways to integrate some of the things
Mhm,
they're doing with some of the things you're doing and bringing that to the whole school. Like that's so great. I mean, I used to be on a team, so I know when you talk about like
mhm,
you work with these people and you know these people, and then all of a sudden you're on your own little island over here. It can definitely be, like you said, it's isolating. But
Mm-hmm.
that's awesome that you had this supportive person that was just as enthusiastic about this as you were, maybe even
Mm-hmm.
more so. Like that's usually you don't see it go that way. Usually it's the other way around. Like the librarian's like, yeah, we're gonna do this thing, and the teacher's like, okay, all right, we'll get there. That's awesome. And it's kind of funny. I just am thinking of this now, but we're going to be talking about your Writers Week here. And I just did another episode about how we can bring more writing from the school library. And it's funny, I don't think of the library generally as being a place that is necessarily supporting writing sort of directly.
Mm.
As a huge reader as a kid, like that absolutely formed my ability to write. And like people say, oh, you're such a great writer. It's because I read all the time. So like I know we're supporting it
Mm-hmm.
that way, but this, you are bringing it to a whole different level. This is really something. So this is really cool. So you had this sort of all this work that you were doing with authors, which is great. You've got
Mm-hmm.
this English teacher that's interested. You're doing the one read. So
Mm-hmm.
now, how does that evolve into Writers Week?
So her and I kind of came up with, I guess we would say, some mission-like ideas. Like, what is our mission in Writers League? What is the point? Okay, so I do have to give some credit. There is a high school in the Chicagoland area called Friend High School, and they originally kind of made Writers Week their thing.
Hmm.
It became well known among um, high school teachers in the area, and that they were getting big authors. They were spending a lot of money. They were having all these cool experiences. So
Hmm.
many, many years ago, the librarian in my district at the high school level had tried to get a writers week off the ground kind of at her school.
Mm-hmm.
And it's super challenging in a high school setting, right? The
Oh
buy-in is
yeah.
even, more important. Her library space needed to be remodeled and all
Hmm.
these factors. And she eventually left education. And I think, so she had kind of already put a seed in my mind. And then when Connie came to me and said, hey, let's do this, Friend does it. And then she said, she goes, I've been peeking at their Writers Week website and kind of taking a look at the things they do. So we were kind of inspired by that. And then we thought, all right, what is our mission? What do we want to accomplish for the week? And how can obviously we do this, just the two of us, and get buy-in from the staff?
Mm-hmm.
So the first year, what we decided to do was a big part of the mission was we wanted to make the library space accessible to all kids,
Mm-hmm.
meaning kids who are not huge readers and or writers. And so we
Yeah,
wanted to make sure that we included activities that would speak to them.
that's awesome.
Obviously, that would also help with their excitement about the novel.
Mm-hmm.
So that particular year, we had reached out to Dusty Bowling, and she lives in Arizona, and she was going to be in the Chicago area. And here's what's funny: I had reached out to her. She does not work with an agent, so all you librarians who are, at least not yet, um, she was wonderful because she communicated one on one. But when I reached out to her, I didn't hear back, and I thought, I wonder, should I do it again? You never know if you're being too aggressive. But
Mm-hmm.
Connie, being the young millennial that she is, said, she was like, "Oh, Jen, let me handle this. I'm just going to get on Twitter." Like she said, Dusty's very active on Twitter. I'm just going to DM her. And I was very like, whoa, I mean, really? That seems a little assertive. And she's like, no, no, this will be great. And she was right.
Hmm.
Dusty and her got into this conversation, and that's how we were able to land her actually for that first year.
Huh.
So we decided to go with a book, and I would suggest this for any school that's interested in a one book, one school. We decided to go with Canyon's Edge because it's written in verse.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought, hey, this is a book that's a fast read. It is deals with so many different topics. It has,
Yeah.
adventure in it, so it's going to encompass all kinds of different kinds of readers.
Mm-hmm.
It's accessible in the sense for teachers won't be as intimidated to get through it just because of the length. It
Mm-hmm.
was affordable, was already in paperback, so we were able
Mm-hmm.
to fund every student in our building received their own copy.
Nice.
And that's a really special moment when you are standing as a librarian right in the hallway. And where my library is located, it's in a central part of the school, so I'm very fortunate. But I see I see at least half of the student body daily,
Hmm.
and to see every kid carrying that book
Yeah.
That month kind of leading up to her visit was pretty cool, very exciting.
Oh, I bet. That's
Um,
amazing.
it just gave us so much to talk about. It gave me something else to connect with kids about. Um, and so then we decided, all right, so we have the book, we have the author. What else can we bring to that week? We want to make writing accessible to kids. Um, what is something we started to think about our curriculum and kind of feeling like, as we had moved towards the core standards, what were we losing? We lost a lot of ability to do creative writing.
Mm-hmm.
So we thought,
Yeah.
hey, why don't we work on some poetry? And then I had this connection I did my master's in Vermont at Middlebury, and in Middlebury, poetry was just a big part of the curriculum. And I had a connection with a gentleman who runs a literary poetry magazine out of Vermont.
Hmm.
And he and his partner actually do professional development for teachers. I had been to some of his professional development when I was a teacher, and I really liked him. I thought he made poetry very accessible for young people.
Hmm.
So I just got online and reached out to him and said, hey, I've got this grant this year. We're doing this one book, one school. I would love, what do you think about coming in as our writer in residence, is what we called it.
That's amazing.
And he was amazing. He was so awesome, so Vermont, so down to earth, just, works with kids, works on the East Coast a lot, does a lot of work out there, obviously. But he flew in, he spent 2.5 days at my school, and then he spent 2.5 days at my sister middle school.
That's incredible.
And Connie and I were able to work the schedule so that every single student would see him.
Huh.
So there's a lot of things about, I mean, as you know, there's not a lot of male ELA teachers in my building anyway. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just liked this experience of having this kind of, this gentleman, from the East Coast who was very active, dressed in all of his Columbia gear, teaching poetry to these kids, making it accessible for them. And he was super flexible. I said to him, hey, poetry is my jam. How do you feel if I kind of team teach with you? And he was like, no, Jen, absolutely, let's do it. So it was really the two of us. So we
Nice.
were able to, with my furniture in the library, clean out and move furniture. I have flexible furniture. We moved everything and basically set up the entire library for Writers Week. So he came in on a Monday and Tuesday. Every student in my building was also funded a black and white composition book.
Hmm.
We made custom stickers for Writers Week with the year on it and the Canyon's Edge. So every kid got a sticker. And then, of course, the library had all kinds of promotions. We gave away cactus pens. We gave away all these things that had to do with Dusty's book. And then his lessons, he and I, of course, Zoomed a couple times before he came, and he ran some lessons by me. I told him I loved him. I thought they'd go great. And he was uber flexible. He did something a little different for each grade level, which was great. So we have
Hmm.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I would say, the one challenge is that we did, in order to make it so that every kid could see him, we did have sometimes 2 or 3 classes at once. So in
Okay.
my library, it works out. So we could have up to 90 kids in a room. And
Wow.
you would think, holy smokes, like that's a lot of kids, right?
Yeah.
It is. But, my teachers were there to help us monitor. I'm obviously there helping him teach. He's there. Connie was in there. My administration was so kind. They were able to get her a sub for a day so that she could come in and help teach.
Nice.
Um, just so much support.
Yeah.
And
Boy.
that was such a cool experience for the kids. So he was there the
Yeah.
first 2 days. And then Dusty came on Wednesday. And she did something really cool where she did 3 separate grade level talks to the kids.
Okay.
And they just sit on the floor. They just sit in the library. My school is we have about 200 kids per grade level.
Okay.
And, she only talks for 45 minutes. So she would talk to the kids. She was very engaging, wonderful, has a PowerPoint. I have a microphone system in my library. So that's perfect. It's
Nice.
ideal. And then she offered, this is one of my favorite things we do for Writers Week, is we do pay our authors a little bit extra to run a writer's workshop with kids.
Hmm.
So Connie and I will come up with a Google form where we'll ask the kids a series of questions, and then we make this little flyer with a QR code. We put it all over the building, and we say, we advertise on the announcements, and we have Canvas as our iOS, and we can put announcements, push them to the entire student body that way. And we have them fill out this kind of easy Google form. Hey, do you want to come and take a writing workshop with Dusty Bowling? Do you like to creative write and you don't get to? And we capped it at 40 kids, and we hit 40 kids. 40 kids signed up.
Nice.
And then, we really went all out. We made them little custom invitations. So
Cool.
my paraprofessional, I have a paraprofessional, which I have to give her credit because I couldn't do half the stuff I do if I didn't have her. So this was something I gave her. I said, can you make like a fun custom invitation? And then the kids got these invitations delivered at lunch.
Huh.
It was very cool. And of course, you have to have teachers have to be flexible about that, right? They have to allow that student then to miss minutes in the afternoon so they can hang out with Dusty Bowling.
Yeah.
So that was very cool. These kids, and from a teaching perspective, and I'm sure you feel this way too, just because you're an author doesn't mean you're a teacher. So you never know like how that's going to go.
Yeah.
And I have had some experiences with authors that I'm sitting in the back thinking, oh man, they're losing them. But actually, I'm wrong. The kids love it. They love it. They absolutely love it. And I get a really wide variety of kids too. Kids that you wouldn't think would be interested, want to come.
Yeah.
So we do that on Wednesday. We also have we created a lemonade stand. In Dusty's book, the young girl is eating, she talks about prickly pears when she's in the desert. And I got some prickly pear juice and we made lemonade so the kids could taste it because it's not common in the Midwest.
Huh. That's awesome.
And so we had like a lemonade stand. So like as they went to lunch one day, every kid got a little Dixie cup. And you would think it would be a mess. They were so respectful. It was awesome. They were great.
That's so great.
They loved it. So we did that. Then on the fourth day, we decided to take a little bit of a break. We needed kids to make sure they were getting their minutes in other classes, obviously.
Right.
So we wanted to give kids one of the reasons, a part of our mission for Writers Week was to expose kids to different jobs that they could have through the process of writing.
Okay.
That you don't have to be an author, that writing and reading, this is going to be a part of your life. And so very fortunately, students that I have had in my program many, many years ago that I taught, I've stayed in contact with them, and some of them have become writers. So I reached out. I had a student who used to work at Harper Publishing, and she actually was an editor for middle grade books.
Huh.
So I hired her to do a 45-minute Zoom with the kids. And then she did 2 Zooms on Thursday of that week. And then I hired another student who's actually a journalist living in Colorado.
Ooh.
And she had just taken a new job, and it was the perfect opportunity. So I just went into the Zooms and kind of, had the conversation with them and kind of guided the conversation. But then all the teachers Zoomed in so their classrooms could see it.
Okay.
And then the kids could ask questions.
Nice.
So just showing them like the purpose of, that writing is not, you don't have to be a novelist, right? You don't have to write a novel, that there are different jobs and different ways that writing will become relevant in your life.
Yeah. Boy.
And then on our last day, this was really my most exciting thing. On the last day, we kept racking our brains, like, what can we bring to the school that is really going to get my non-readers excited, right? Like, what can I do? So I decided to, on a whim, reach out to an exotic animals organization here in Illinois. And I called this gentleman and I said, hey, I am looking for animals or critters that are indigenous to Arizona. And I told him the whole thing. I said, we have this book and this is what we've done. And she encounters tarantulas and snakes and other things in the desert. And he's like, oh yeah, I absolutely have those.
Huh.
I'm like, really? So then I have this whole conversation with him and I said, I need you to send me someone who can handle middle school boys. Like, you got to send me somebody engaging, and then I said to him, I go, is this a dorky thing to do? Like, is a 14-year-old middle school boy going to think this is cool? And the guy who owns the company goes, Jen, I'm going to send you a 30-foot boa, and it doesn't matter how old you are, they're always cool. I'm like, okay. And it was an absolute hit.
Oh, I bet.
And
Wow.
it was so cool. And he did 3 presentations. So I got to do it in the library, each grade level, and he like worked the crowd. He was great with kids. The kids got to hold things, touch things, and then he brought in the Arizona like desert talk. It was out of this world.
That's awesome.
It was
Wow.
so cool. Yeah.
Man, I mean, I'm listening to you as you're going through each one of these. Like, each one of these seems like, wow, this is like a week's worth of stuff to just that the kids could dwell on. And you're doing all this all at once in 5 days. It's amazing. Boy. And it sounds like you've got some incredible support, like both fiscally, but also it sounds like your administration and your teachers were really helping to support your goals and your the way that you're bringing the students in, and like, helping you, giving you that time, which is probably the most valuable commodity we've got in school. So that's really
Right.
awesome. Boy.
And I don't know if you remember, but I feel like when I went into education in the late 90s, the big push was interdisciplinary education.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like we've kind of gotten away from that. And I
Yeah.
feel like this isn't, whenever we do Writers Week, this is an opportunity for us to come together as a staff and as a community of learners. And what Connie and I did was we prepped a presentation for the staff months in advance. And we said, look, this is what we're going to do. These are our ideas. And then we actually laid out for the staff ideas for every subject that we thought would tie into the novel.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And you know how it is. Like, your administrator can't make people do these things. But
Right.
if they're interested, like my art teacher, doing watercolor desert scenes, or my music teacher. So we have a music teacher who's wonderful. And she actually, so Canyon's Edge, the author Dusty uses Beatles music throughout the book.
Oh,
She like
I'd forgotten that.
references Beatles music.
Huh.
So for the week leading up to Dusty coming, she played Beatles music over the announcements in the morning. And then her choir sang for Dusty in the library a bunch of Beatles music.
Oh, that's so cool.
So just, yeah, bringing that alive for the kids and like something they can do for the author that was really kind. That turned out to just be so cool. That was so cool. 3D printing, bookmarks. There were so many things that we could do to really, really kind of help it explode for the kids and have it be something that they hopefully would remember for a long time.
Oh yeah, I can't. I just hearing about it, I'm going to remember this for a long time. This is amazing, and I love too. You talked about that you got a copy of the book for all the kids, which is great, and that's something I'm hoping we can do. Actually, I've been talking about doing the same Canyon's Edge one read for our school too, buying every kid a copy of the book. But I love that you also got them composition notebooks, and now everybody's got one, and so everybody's got this option. They've got the resource they need if they want to start playing with some of the different writing skills or mirroring something they're seeing in the novel, or when they're hearing from Dusty, maybe they've got ideas they want to jot down. Like, what a great additional piece to add to all of this that I literally it wouldn't have occurred to me, but it totally makes sense. It's brilliant. And it's probably, I mean, I would imagine if you're buying bulk composition notebooks, probably not a huge cost either.
They were pretty inexpensive. And you know what? My department head, who's wonderful, is a reading specialist. And so she's super supportive. And she was the one that was like, hey, why don't I use a little bit of our budget and we'll buy these composition books? And that way the kids can be really unified. It kind of creates this opportunity. And I mean, I can't believe I'm going to say this, but our kids are one-to-one devices. They have Apple iPads.
Okay.
So for them to actually go old school with paper, it helped, it helped my guy from Vermont not, lose his audience, because he's old school. He was using the whiteboard and paper, and it got the kids. We were like, all right, guys, we're going to go retro. We're going back to, a writing utensil. And we've kind of kept that vibe now.
Nice.
So for the following years, we change it up a little bit every year. For instance, one year, and it's so funny because if you have the time and you have the energy, these authors are out there and they want to participate and they want to come. One of the coolest authors I've had, and I would suggest any librarian reach out to him, is K.R. Alexander.
Mm,
He works for Scholastic. He's absolutely amazing. I thought he was like 25. He's like very hip and young. He's not, he's older than that, but he came all the way from Oregon, all the way out to
wow.
Chicago. And we just got really lucky. He has family in the Chicago area. So he was able to like, but he was amazing. He also writes for video games. He works for Marvel. He does things. So
Wow.
as a writer, he was able to speak to the kids in a completely different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably one of the best responses I've gotten from students was for him. And
Hmm.
then he did a writing workshop too. He did a spooky stories, and he
Nice.
was amazing.
Talk
So
about
yeah, we
another
try to
great,
change it up every year.
yeah, and another great sort of angle on writing. If he's working at Marvel and he's working on video games, like you don't think about the fact that those require writing, but absolutely there's writers behind so many of those pieces. So bringing in that other way of thinking about this too, that's so cool. Oh boy.
It's funny because I was with my 7th grade book club the other day, and they said, "Miss Eberle, why haven't we been hearing about Writers Week?" And it was so. I go, guys, calm down. You're going to hear about it. It's coming. And they were like, well, we haven't heard anything and we want to know what's happening. I'm like, it's coming in March. Don't worry. So the kids have kind of, because they're there for 3 years, obviously we try to change it up. So these kids have not seen Dusty. So they will see her for Canyon's Edge. But we had such a great experience with her. We definitely wanted to like recycle that experience. But we do change it every year, and they're kind of looking forward to it now. They're kind of expecting, hey, they're asking me, actually, my 7th graders are begging for me to get Sharon Draper,
Hmm.
and they love her. And I said, well, she's probably pretty expensive, but I'll see what I can do. She might be able to do a Zoom because we like to bring in as many authors in the week that we can.
That's awesome.
So, like for instance, this year we'll have Dusty, but then I'm going to have Crystal Giles is going to Zoom with the kids as well.
Hmm.
And she's in North Carolina, so she's going to Zoom with the kids. And then we try to bring an alum in every year. So I do have an old student who just published her first picture book.
Oh.
And so she might be Zooming in with us too. And so really bringing our alum back has been an awesome experience. So the kids
Oh, I
can kind
bet.
of see, like, look at all these students who came from this small little town outside of Chicago doing big things with writing and reading.
Yeah. Man, I'm in my head, I'm picturing like pulling out the yearbook and showing the kids like here they are and then they're here and they're adults now and look
Yep.
someday that's going to be you.
So cool.
Man, so you've been doing this for several years. How do
Mhm.
you know how many years you've been doing your Writers
So
Week?
this actually, so this is the 4th year for Writers Week, and then
Okay.
I did forget though, when the first year I went into the library, we did do, and now I'm not gonna remember. Oh, that's terrible. It's been 9 years though. We did an event. We did a week, but it wasn't as elaborate as it is now. I brought an artist in residence. Oh, we did do
Oh.
a one book, one school. Oh, it's coming back to me. Thank goodness. Um, I don't know if you've heard of this book. It's called I Will Always Write Back.
I don't think I have.
So it's a nonfiction book about a girl who, when she is in 7th grade, in the 90s, has to have a she has to get a pen pal from another country. She decides to
Mhm.
get a pen pal from Africa. Anyway, it changes both of their lives.
Hmm.
And this is her book about how it changes their life. It's the kids love it. And a
Interesting.
teacher, actually the French teacher in the building, came to me and said, "Hey Jen, this author was just at my daughter's middle school, a couple towns over. She was awesome. You should look into getting her." And I'm
Hmm.
like, "Oh, it's my first year in the library. I don't know. I have a lot to learn." And she goes, "Well, what if I help?" And I'm always like, "Okay, I'm going to put you to work." So we were able to bring that author in. And then what we did was I decided to bring in, because of the STEAM element of the library, kind of, right? I actually do have a STEAM lab attached to my library. We
Nice.
call it the Spark Lab. Um, I wanted to bring in other activities that had to do with that novel. And so I brought an artist in residence
Hmm.
and for a day, and she did a needle felting, and we made a huge mural that hangs in our building inspired by that book.
Cool.
And then throughout the week, I did a whole bunch of other activities in the library that had to do with the novel. So that's so 9 years ago, I did that. And then, COVID happened and that kind of threw us all for a loop for a couple of years. And I think
Hmm.
then Connie came back and was like, hey, let's get back into this.
Hmm.
So I
Love
guess
it.
technically it's the 5th time we'll be doing it this year.
Okay. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly the students are loving it, that they are clamoring to, they're asking you for authors and they're asking when it's coming again. So that's clearly a positive feedback that you're getting there. How about, have you heard anything from the teachers about how, their thoughts on this?
Um, so my principal asked us, after the first year, hey, can you guys put out a survey and kind of see if you can get some feedback? And you know how surveys go.
Yeah.
Not most people don't fill them out.
Yeah.
But I did get a little bit of feedback. They felt like they didn't have enough time with the book. They
Hmm.
felt like they wanted more activities provided.
Okay.
They wanted more suggestions.
Mm.
And so Connie and I then every year will send out like a little, hey, how did you feel about the week? Do you feel like it applied? And most everybody is positive because I think they're not forced to participate technically.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's kind of a choice, but it's just more fun if they do, right?
Right.
It's just kind of, we just try to like pump it up like, this is just more fun if you get involved because the kids are excited,
Yeah.
and these are our ideas, and I even will go in and teach lessons. So for instance, last year we didn't have a writer in residence, and we decided money wise, we were trying to keep our budget a little bit more just a little bit lower. And so I said, well, hey, our district was really pushing sketchnoting
Yep.
as a way of taking notes. And I had been to a conference on sketchnoting, and then one of the coaches in our district is a master sketchnoter. She actually does it professionally.
Hmm.
And I met with her and I said, hey, do you think like maybe I could teach the kids sketchnoting for 2 days instead of hiring someone to come in? I'll just be the teacher. And that actually was one of the best experiences I've had in the library.
Hmm.
Because the kids see you as a teacher, right?
Hmm.
And I got to see a side of kids that I don't get to see.
Yeah.
So like all of a sudden, all these students that I know maybe don't love reading or writing is challenging for them, they are master artists.
Hmm.
And to see them blossom like with this other opportunity was amazing. And that actually turned out to be so successful that my 6th grade teachers had me teach it the following year. And now they use it all the time.
That's awesome.
So
Huh.
that turned out to be really positive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Cool. So great feedback. It sounds like people are digging this. The students are digging this. The teachers are digging this. I love that you sort of do some pre-gaming, some pre-planning, and say like, okay, here are things that may fit in your subject area. And
Mhm.
like you said, no one's required, but at least you're giving them that sort of running start if they do decide they want to try and incorporate some of this. And like you were saying, we used to talk about interdisciplinary learning, and that sort of happens sometimes, but not as ideally as as much as we'd like. But we also talk about these days it's all about reading across the curriculum,
Mhm.
and how often is that really happening?
Mhm.
But this is a great opportunity. Like a one read gives everybody the same book, and if you can get the teachers to buy in,
Right.
so that they're reading the same thing, and now you've got that shared reading experience, not just the shared knowledge, but like, because you can sum up a book, you can tell people here's what it's about, but it's not the same
Mhm.
thing as when you actually read it, and then you can have those conversations about, oh, what'd you think of this, and how can you believe that happened? And especially, I mean, Canyon's Edge is very high on my list of ideas I want to use for a one read, because there's so many things in it. Like there's so many things you
There's
could do.
and that's another thing. I was jealous that I didn't get to teach the novel because there is so many things to teach.
Yeah.
So I will tell you, AI has totally changed my game this year.
Okay.
So my school district has is offered. They bought a subscription to an AI program that they wanted teachers to play with, and I've kind of gone crazy with it. So for instance, I was able to create a 10-minute podcast using AI about Canyon's Edge.
Hmm.
And so some of my teachers who are already reading it, they're asking me, Jen, do you have any supplemental things? And I'm like, oh my God, I have this 10-minute podcast. Listen to it. It'll give the kids some ideas to write about, like if you want them to write. So I'm also going to use AI to help me create an escape room. And one of the
Hmm.
things we wanted to do was have one of my goals for the last 9 years, which is a long time, is to get parents, parents want to be involved, but there's in middle school, there's not a ton of opportunities. So we wanted to have a literacy night where they could come and do activities about Canyon's Edge. And I was thinking of doing an
Mm.
escape room.
Neat. I feel like escape rooms are sort of a little bit of an underutilized tool, especially for
Mm-hmm.
getting your science and your math, so kind of sneaking that in, with
Right,
like
right.
combinations or, mix these things and get this other thing and what's the result and that's the answer. Like there's a lot of things you can do there to
Yeah.
kind of tie those in the ways that we don't always get to. Huh. That's a great idea to bring the community in.
Yeah, I've been trying to, the positive is that the kids look forward to it, but I also think there's almost an expectation. And I want them to really understand that this is not the norm. like
Right.
like this is really, really unusual that you get to have a one-on-one writing session with Lindsay Curry, right?
Yeah.
And she or KR Alexander or these Margaret Haddocks, like come on, all grew up reading her books.
Yeah.
And so helping them understand that, I'm always trying to figure that part of it out. And so I think
Hmm.
getting parents, like I ran into a parent, I'm also a public librarian in the same community. And so last year I ran into a parent and she had wonderful things to say. And she said, Jen, I feel like people don't know enough about this in the
Hmm.
community. They don't know how special it is. And I'm like, I know. And I'm struggling with like how to get that out there.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm still struggling. I'm always thinking about it. How can we, advertise it more? So I figure if I could get parents in to kind of
Yeah.
see some of the and do more like family oriented things, just make it more literacy.
Yeah.
So that's one of my ideas for this year. We'll see if I can bring that to fruition.
Yeah. And I mean, you talk about people not being aware of how much goes into this. Like,
Hmm.
and maybe this is just my own ignorance or my own shelteredness, but I don't think I've heard of a middle school that has an artist in residence or a writer in residence before. That's an amazing get for your school to have to be able to. I mean, to have it is amazing. To be able to brag about it and say like, oh yeah, we've got this author who comes in to work with our students. No big deal. Like,
I know. I think it's a big deal too. It's pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, boy, that's awesome, man. So it sounds like there's tons of opportunities for this to sort of be adjusted to fit whatever students like. This sounds like it's so infinitely adaptable for your whole population. Are there any
Hmm.
particular things that you try to bear in mind to help sort of gear anything for, I don't know, ELL students or special ed students or anything like
Well,
that?
I will tell you this year. So one of the things, so this year we couldn't bring our Vermont poet back.
Hmm.
So I decided, Connie and I were talking, we're like, I really want to hit some of those EL kids and some of the kids that, I don't get to interact with as much. What really speaks to them? Well, when I look at my statistics in the library, what speaks to them is graphic novels, right?
Okay,
That's what they're checking out.
sure.
They just love them and they devour them. Whether it's manga or it's just true graphic novel or it's nonfiction in a graphic novel form. We even have, as a part of our curriculum in 8th grade, we have a graphic novel unit.
That's
So
awesome.
we teach that, right? So I'm like, well, what can we do? And then my paraprofessional said, hey, she works in a public library too. And she said, Jen, there was a cartoonist who I think is like a graphic novelist who came to our library and he was amazing.
Hmm.
Why don't I get his number? So that's who we're having come this year. We're having a graphic artist come in. He's going to do 3 days in our building.
Wow.
He is doing after school. So what he's going to do is based on her novel, he is going to teach them how to do some quick drawings
Okay.
and then how to create a character that they could somehow interact within that setting.
Huh.
I have no idea how this is going to go, Steve. I'm just keeping my fingers crossed. I
Hey.
figure they loved sketchnoting.
Yeah.
So like this guy is a comic artist. So I'm like, okay, this is going to be great. I've met with him on Zoom a couple times. He seems fabulous. Apparently he's well received in, and this is kind of his jam. He wants to get into schools and do this, but he's very, very well received in public libraries.
Okay.
So he's coming in with his partner. There's 2 guys. They're going to do this. They're going to do multiple lessons over the course of 3 days. And then kids who are interested will get to sign up for after school, taking their story to the next level.
That's wild.
So I guess I'm hoping that, this will kind of speak to them.
Yeah.
Right. A little bit. And of course, like giving kids visuals, like a lot of our teachers just showing them what is a slot canyon and just helping them understand some of the elements of the novel. Right.
Right.
I'll offer lunchtime. Come on in at lunch and let's talk about the book. Or I want to show you this cool mountain climbing, this slot canyon rappelling clip so that you can get it. I even looked into, and I just couldn't make it work. The first time we had her, I did look into bringing in a climbing wall. I know I'm a little over the top, but you know what? Go big or go home, right? Like,
hey, why not?
If you can do it. I couldn't make it work because we didn't have a surface that it could. Anyway, it didn't work. But we even talked about going to our YMCA and having a family night where they can climb there. So I could get my athletes in, my kids, these other kids, these kind of outliers who don't. So I'm kind of hoping the comic book artist is going to speak to some of those other populations and maybe connect with some of those other kids.
That's awesome, man.
We'll see.
Yeah.
And if not, I got the creepy crawlers.
Hey, you can't go wrong with creepy crawlers.
I know, tarantulas, right? And boas. Come on. It's good stuff.
So if I can't imagine that anybody who hears this is going to be like, yeah, that's not for me. So many people are going to want to do this. So do you have any suggestions for folks as they're thinking about, getting ready to do this for the first time? Any particular things they should sort of have in the front of their minds?
I mean, you have to have a flexible staff, right? Your teachers have to, and you have to kind of sell it to your staff. Like, this is why this is important. If we, as a learning community, if we think these experiences are important for kids, then we have to be willing to give up our minutes, right? We have to be willing to go on a field trip. We have to be willing to let kids have these experiences if we think they're valuable. You can't say, well, I value that. I want my kids to have these unique educational opportunities, but then you don't actually give up your minutes. So trying to help your staff see the benefit, I think, is pretty important. And that's why we give them the suggestions. And then I think you do need to, and I see this online all the time. I think librarians are so great at reaching out to one another. But I think finding the right authors, right? Finding the authors. And believe me, I've tried to get like Rex Ogle, who wrote Free Lunch, we worked with his agent over the course of months. And because I knew that he would speak to a population of kids, right? To my boys who are reluctant readers. And I knew that they would connect with him, and we just couldn't make it work,
Yeah.
So I think you have to know you're going to put in a lot of time that it may not, develop into anything, but making the connections is a huge part of it. Megan Freeman, we had Megan Freeman, who also wrote Alone. Also a book in poetry, poem, form, verse. I do think that can be the way to go, either a short book or a book in verse. And then trying to find a book that has content that is both adventurous, and you know what I mean? So there's some adventure, there's something to kind of spark interest for all of your students, which can be challenging, but I think that helps too. And then finding authors like K.R. Alexander, as an author who he even told a story about how he had a buddy who worked for Scholastic, and this friend called him and said, "Hey, KR, you want to write this book? I have the outline. Will you write it?" And he's like, "Oh man, I'll write it, but I'm not going to put my name on it because it's not going to sell." And he tells this story to the kids, right? He's like, "Yeah, I've sold like 5 million copies and now nobody knows who I am because I don't have my name on the book." So finding, I think, authors that can relate to kids, right, I've had a lot of authors. So 9 years, I've had over 12 different middle grade authors.
Wow.
And some of them are really fabulous with kids and some of them are not.
Yeah. It's a funny thing. Like, you would imagine for some reason, I always imagine like, oh, if they're an author, they're going to be good at like a reading. If you go to see an author at a reading and you're like,
Mhm.
oh, they wrote it, they're going to, they're going to crush this. And some authors just aren't good at public speaking and they're not good at reading
Mhm.
their own work. And like, they're awesome at putting the words on the page, but they don't have
Mhm.
that presentation skill. And like working
Mhm.
with kids, that requires a particular set of skills, and you got to be able to juggle a lot of different things when you're working with kids. And like you
Mhm.
said, not all authors are necessarily going to have that, but it's awesome that you've got local resources that you can draw on, both from your
Mhm.
school but also from your public library, that you are able to
Mhm.
sort of get almost like a preview of, oh yeah, okay, this person presented, and so we sort
Mhm.
of know what they're like and we sort of know how that's going to work. That's really great. That's a great idea. I got to try and tap my public library and see what they've
Yeah,
got.
it is, and another thing I would say is, I mean, you know, those of us of a certain age, right? Like social media is wonderful and it can be such a pain. It can be such a distractor. But I have really like Connie reaching out to Dusty through the DMs. Sometimes you're not going to get these authors to respond unless it's through social media. Neil Schusterman is a great example of an amazing author. He is wonderful at, if he's in an area, like he'll be like, "Hey, I'm in Houston this week and I've got 4 hours. Can I come to your school?"
Hmm.
Like you gotta be following these authors, right? You have to find their platform and follow them, because some of them, so Neil Schusterman, actually, I don't know how I got in contact with him. This was before he wrote Scythe. Um, but he was available in the Chicagoland area and he had put something out on Twitter and I couldn't make it happen. Like I couldn't make it happen. And he
Mm-hmm.
was, his writing was a little bit too old for middle school at the time. But I contacted my high school librarian. I go, "Hey, Neil Schusterman's in town. He's dying to do something. Make it happen." And she did. She's like, "Oh my
Nice.
gosh, okay." So I think you have to follow these authors on these platforms. Um, and I think making connections with them and tagging them and doing those things has kind of helped too a little bit. Now with social media shifting, I used to do it all through Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
And I am curious to see how that might shift in the next few years. I'm not sure, but
Yeah.
I think it's been beneficial to make those connections, um, and even on Facebook, like you can go old school, go Facebook, and these librarians are great at saying, "I'm thinking," somebody just put it on Facebook, "I'm thinking of bringing Dusty to my school." And of course I chimed in. I was like, "She's amazing. DM me if you want all the info, but this is what I loved."
Nice.
So using social media to make those connections for sure.
For what it's worth, I will say that Bluesky has a pretty good burgeoning middle grade
Okay.
and elementary author scene going on over there. So,
Okay.
for what it's
Okay.
worth, something to think about.
Right.
Um,
I know. I
Man,
know.
so many things to think about here. Speaking of thinking about, boy, my head is spinning with all the possibilities, but this is so cool. So, okay, we've got all these great ideas for this lesson. We are now going to take our 90-degree turn and go into our book break.
Book break. Squiddy.
So
Okay.
the book break, you can share any title you want. It's something that you just think people should know about. Could be an author title, whatever works.
Are you going to
So,
limit me to just one?
well, if you've got more than one, we can talk about more than one. Whatever works for you.
This is the reader services public librarian in me.
Yeah.
So I will tell you the best kid book I think I've read. And middle grade literature is tricky, right? And because all of us read so much, it's hard for something to stand out.
Yeah.
But I just did with my 7th grade book club, Simon Sort of Says
Oh, yeah.
by Aaron Bow, I think is how it's pronounced. Wow. I mean, there are so many things I want to talk about in that book. I want to teach that book the writing craft, and it's hilarious.
Yes.
I do think some of the jokes go over the kids' heads, but I'm loving it as an adult. So I'm going to reach out to Miss Bow to see if she's available for next year, because that's how much I loved it. I think that is just, it's heartwarming. It has such a variety of characters,
Yeah.
and there, yeah. So that's my favorite kid book that I've read in a long time.
It's
We
also
do
got
have
a
in,
really
in Illinois,
great.
we have what's called a Rebecca Caudle Award,
Okay.
and that is it's kind of like, we also have Blue Stem. We have, I mean, all states have these, right? I think
Right.
Texas has quite a few. So usually the Rebecca Caudle books are pretty good. But Aaron's book's not on there. My guess is it will be on that list next year. So that's my favorite kid book.
It's also
Adult
got, I'm going to point
books,
out that Simon sort of says, also has a great tie into social media and getting our kids to
right?
think about digital footprints,
Yep.
and even some of the actual infrastructure or the physical side of some of the technology, like because of I don't want to give too much away, but like
Hmm.
this kid finds himself living in a town where basically there's no internet. And so why is that? And how does that work? And like getting the kids thinking about some of the scientific principles behind some of the technologies that they use on a daily
Hmm.
basis that they probably don't think about too much. Plus, like you said, hilarious. Like it's got some of the
Oh,
funniest stuff in
hilarious.
it.
The jokes, I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Um, and then adult stuff, well, another kid book I did love, Alone by Megan Freeman. I think if your kids love Canyon's Edge, I think that is such a great companion book. Um, and Megan Freeman was amazing. We had her too, and she's amazing. So I would highly suggest her.
Okay.
Okay, so adult books, the best thing I've read probably in the last 10 years, like, I can't believe I'm going to say this, is it's called All the Colors of the Dark by
Okay.
Chris Whitaker. It's got something for everybody. It's got a little bit of mystery. It's got a little bit of love. It's got nostalgia. It's got a serial killer. It's kind of got everything.
Hmm.
Obviously, very much an adult book. That is something that as a librarian, I do for my staff. Using Canva, I put together an amazing book recommendation list every year around the holidays. I put kid
Mm.
book recommendations, and then I put staff recommendations. Buy this for your mother-in-law, buy this for your dad, buy this for your mom. They love it, and I suggest all librarians to do that. I am considering having my principal attach it in his newsletter to parents.
Ooh, there you go.
Just as like, hey, if you have someone in your family that loves to read, here are some great kid books, here are some adult books, and so on.
Yeah.
So All the Colors of the Dark, and then I just finished Tom Lake, which was
Hmm.
I think it was Ann Patchett's most recent book.
Okay.
I think let me take a look. It was fabulous. I am also a huge proponent of audio. And I
Okay.
try to get my kids, when I was teaching, I used to require them to listen to an audiobook because I think that is a skill, and I tell them it is reading. You're not
Mm-hmm.
cheating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so making those opportunities available to them. Yeah, so Ann Patchett wrote a book called Tom Lake. It is read by Meryl Streep.
Oh.
Just a lovely story I would recommend for anybody's mother-in-law. Like
Okay.
just a lovely story about a family on a farm in northern Michigan, and it's during COVID. So their adult children come back to the farm to help them over the summer, and it's just very pleasant and enjoyable.
Hmm. Well, I think I know what my wife's getting
Oh
for
yes, it
Christmas.
was it was it was lovely.
Nice. That's cool. All right. So now I've got some awesome titles to add to my list. This is great. So I really appreciate you sharing all of this information, book titles, lessons. I mean, so many ideas for things that I need to now start setting up and digging into for the future. So I love this. And we happen to just come across each other online, which, because you were sharing some awesome stuff. So how can people find you if they want to try and touch base with you?
So I will say right now, I am on Twitter. I've been a little less active, but I am thinking of going to Bluesky. So my Twitter handle is at MSSLIBD95, which is my District 95. You can find me there, but I have set up my Bluesky account. I need to push myself into, because I feel like I'm starting
Yeah.
over, and I do only use Twitter for work. So it is only like my entire feed is librarianship. Those are the people I follow. Those are the people, those are, and I mean, if you don't know who, oh gosh, there's a middle school librarian. I want to say her last name is Corey. She's amazing. She does all
Yes.
the
Melissa
beautiful,
Corey.
yes, yes,
Yes.
she is amazing.
Yes.
And I borrow so much of what she does,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah. She's
She is a
great. She shares
wonderful
so
asset.
much.
Her
Yeah.
Canva game is
Oh yeah.
stellar.
Amazing. Amazing.
Yes.
For what it's worth, if you're on Blue Sky, they
Okay.
do things called starter packs, and you can like it basically is a list of people you might want to follow. And there's at least
Oh.
one school librarian. I think there's a couple of school librarian starter packs, and it's just
Oh.
lists of people. Also, if you go to mine, you don't have to follow me, but if you go to mine and look at my followers and following lists,
Mm-hmm.
there's several hundred school librarians there.
Oh,
So
awesome.
yeah, super easy to track down that way.
Yes. And I would say,
So
yeah, if anybody is thinking about anybody can email me. I'm on the Lake Zurich Middle School South website. I'm not hard to find at all. I'm out there. I'd be happy to share my information. Connie and we have tried, I think I mentioned this to you last time, we have tried to present at multiple opportunities and we've been rejected. We're not sure what we're doing wrong, but we would love to share all our ideas and just talk about, it's endless. We could talk for hours about all the different things you can do in a writer's week and how to bring your library to the forefront of every classroom,
Yeah. There's
I
always
could talk
more.
forever.
It's awesome. I mean, and it's great that you've got these awesome ideas and you're willing to share them, because I think sometimes we forget that some things might seem kind of basic. Not that your stuff seems basic, but sometimes we think our stuff seems basic to us, but for somebody else, it's like, oh my gosh, I never like this. As simple as I never thought about giving every kid a composition notebook so that they could, take part in one read in a different way. Brilliant, man. Well, hopefully somebody's going to snap you guys up real soon and have you present, because this is some great stuff. Wow. So thank you again so much. I appreciate your time. I really appreciate you sharing all this with us. Thank you.
I appreciate it too, Steve. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the SLLN podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes for the episode. They feature links to the resources shared by our guest, as well as ways to keep in touch with them and links to the book break recommendations. And stop by the SLLN website, home to a curated list of free upcoming virtual events and resources for school librarians. It's easy to become a member of the School Librarian Learning Network. Just visit the site and use what you like. If you have a comment, an idea, a question, or something you want to share, you can email schoolliblearning@gmail.com. That's schoolliblearning@gmail.com. Know a school librarian with something others could learn from? Let us know. Until next time, be good, be safe, and be well.